Buckle up, folks, because today we're diving headfirst into the fever dream that is modern left-wing logic. You ever notice how everything is now somehow racist? Cutting government waste? Racist! Saving taxpayer money? Racist! Probably even checking your receipt at Walmart is somehow racist at this point. These people have taken mental gymnastics to Olympic levels, and yet they always land face first. Take Columbia professor Basil Smigel, who seems to think that Doge, yes, trimming bureaucratic fat, is actually a secret white supremacist plot. Because you see, if a government was once run by a black person, any attempt to make it more efficient must be a direct assault on that black person's legacy. It's the political version of a participation trophy. Once you win, no one's allowed to question how you spent the budget. Now let's roll the clip and see how far this logic rabbit hole goes.
There are people who are charged with trying to find savings. So yes, it's an attack on government, but it's also an attack on this government. What I mean by that is it's an attack on this government that used to be headed by a black man. It's an attack on this government that almost elected a black woman to the highest office in the land. It's an attack on a government that has been more welcoming and more supportive of people who have come to this country in search for a better life.
This might be one of the most impressively unhinged attempts at making basic fiscal responsibility a racial issue. Columbia professor Basil Smigel, who I can only assume teaches a course called Advanced Victimology, how to blame white people for literally everything, is here to inform us that trying to save taxpayers' money is actually a stealth attack on black leadership. That's right, folks. Trimming government waste isn't about efficiency or economics, it's a racial vendetta. And if you don't see it, well, that's just because you're not enlightened enough to sniff out systemic oppression in a budget spreadsheet. Now, let's dissect this nonsense piece by piece. First, Smigel's argument hinges on a textbook genetic fallacy, where the validity of an action is determined not by its merits, but by who it affects. In other words, he's saying that because government spending increased under a black president, any effort to curb that spending must be racially motivated. That's like saying if a guy named Steve ran up a massive bar tab, anyone trying to pay it down must hate people named Steve. It's irrational, it's lazy, and frankly, it's insulting to any serious discussion about government policy. Then we've got the clear appeal to emotion, a classic move when the facts don't align. Notice how he doesn't actually engage with the substance of why cutting government waste might be beneficial. Instead, he shifts the conversation to a vague sense of attack on black politicians, on immigrants, on some nebulous idea of a welcoming government, because, as we all know, questioning government inefficiency is never about, stopping reckless spending. No, never about that. It must be about suppressing marginalized groups, because that's exactly how the game works, folks. Now, let's talk about this hilarious Pocock fallacy Smigel is playing with. He implies that because this particular administration expanding government spending while also having black leadership, any reduction in spending might be a reaction to the leadership itself. This is the equivalent of saying, the last time I had pizza, I got a promotion. Therefore, eating pizza is the key to career success. Correlation does not equal causation, but in the left's worldview, everything is cause and effect as long as it can cry racism at the end of the equation. And let's address what Smigel conveniently leaves out. Who exactly is benefiting from unchecked government expansion? It's certainly not middle-class Americans footing the bill. It's not small businesses drowning in regulations. And it's definitely not the taxpayers watching their dollars vanish into bloated bureaucracies, fraudulent programs, and pork barrel projects that never seem to deliver on their promises. But Smigel wants you to believe that holding the government accountable is somehow an attack not on corruption, not on incompetence, but on blackness itself. It's a desperate, intellectually bankrupt argument designed not to persuade, but to intimidate. Because, let's be real, no one wants to be called a racist. That's the whole game. Instead of debating whether government expansion actually improves lives or just breeds dependency and inefficiency, they move straight to moral condemnation. Oh, you want a balanced budget? Well, I hope you can live with yourself knowing you just committed a hate crime. And this last part where he talks about a government being more welcoming to immigrants is just pure narrative spin. Translation, we let millions of people flood across the border, stretching public resources to the breaking point, and now we're calling it generosity. That's like inviting the entire neighborhood to a house party and then crying racism when someone suggests checking the grocery bill. So what's the takeaway here? The left is so addicted to identity politics that they'll turn anything into a racial grievance. even basic economic policy. Schmickel isn't arguing against wasteful spending cuts. He's just slapping a racist sticker on them and hoping no one asks questions. But here's the thing. People are asking questions, and they're tired of the same old playbook. Because at the end of the day, folks, no matter how much they scream racism, the numbers don't care about your feelings. The budget needs fixing. The debt is crushing future generations, and no amount of Ivy League mental gymnastics is going to change any of that. And speaking of mental gymnastics, Democrat Representative Al Green, better known for interrupting the president during his last address to Congress, is now floating around the idea that he wants to impeach the president. Once again, because I guess Democrats are looking for another failed trilogy to bless the world with.
You're seriously considering introducing articles of impeachment?
I am absolutely going to do it. This
Good
level
joke.
of incivility emanating from the presidency, much of it in policy, is something we cannot tolerate. If President Barack Hussein Obama had behaved in this fashion, he would have been impeached. There is no question in my mind. So I believe that this president cannot escape this one thing that each member of Congress has. 435 of us, we have it. He is a Goliath, but there are 435 Davids in Congress. I'm one of them, and I'm going to bring articles of impeachment.
Good luck.
And the articles would be based on his speech to the joint session?
The articles will be based upon things that have already occurred, not in an indirect sense, but not directly based on that. What he said to the members and to the senator was unacceptable, then that's incivility. So I think we have to, at some point, use righteous incivility. We cannot allow him to just continue to step on us like that and not have some reasonable, righteous retort.
Here we go again. Democrats dusting off their favorite political stunt, impeachment theater. Representative Al Green, the man who treats impeachment like a hobby rather than a constitutional process, has once again declared that President Trump must be removed. And why, you ask? High crimes and misdemeanors, a blatant violation of law? Nope. Because of incivility. That's right. Green's grand legal argument is that Trump is mean, and apparently that's now an impeachable offense. Looks like Democrats are all up in their fifis. Now, Green tries to dress up his tantrum with biblical imagery. Trump is a Goliath, and Congress is made up of 435 Davids, brave, righteous warriors taking down the big, bad orange man. It's a cute analogy, but there's just one problem. David actually had a reason to fight Goliath. What exactly is Green's righteous cause here? That Trump delivered a speech Green didn't like? That he's being mean to Democrats? This isn't some divine battle of good versus evil. This is a congressman stamping his feet because the president hurt his feelings. Then we get this absolute gem. If President Barack Hussein Obama had behaved in this fashion, he would have been impeached. Ah, yes, the classic appeal to hypothetical history, where Democrats invent an alternate timeline where Obama was treated unfairly to justify whatever nonsense they're pushing today. But let's entertain this one for a second. If Obama had done what exactly? Spoken bluntly, attacked his political opponents. Obama did all of that. He demonized his opposition. He called Republicans hostage takers, told supporters to get in people's faces, and dismissed half the country as bitter clingers who cling to their guns and religion. Somehow, no articles of impeachment were filed over that. So this "if Obama did it" argument is a blatant false equivalence, ignoring the fact that Trump and Obama were both combative, but only one was treated as a messianic figure immune to criticism. And that is Obama. We all know that. Now let's get to Green's supposed legal basis for impeachment. He stumbles through his reasoning, admitting that his articles won't be based on a single speech, but rather things that have already occurred, which he then struggles to specify. Translation, I just don't like Trump, and I'm hoping no one asks me for details. That's not how impeachment works. The Constitution lays out clear grounds: treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Being uncivil is not on that list. And then we get peak delusion. We have to use righteous incivility. Ah, yes, the party that screeches about norms and democracy is now calling for incivility in the name of stopping incivility. It's a textbook Moat and Bailey fallacy. Pretending to be the defenders of civility and reason, then openly advocating for disorder when it suits their political goals. At the end of the day, Green's argument boils down to this. We don't like Trump, so we're going to throw a tantrum and call it impeachment. It's the same strategy they've been running since 2016. They don't care about legal precedent. They don't care about due process. They just want Trump gone. And when they can't beat him in an election, they manufacture new excuses to remove him. So good luck with this little charade, Congressman Green. You're about to waste a whole lot of time, energy, and taxpayer money on an impeachment that will go absolutely nowhere, just like the last 2 times. And speaking of low IQ Democrats, in enter our wonderful California Governor Gavin Newsom, who recently started a podcast so that he could invite people on the other side of the aisle. He started with Charlie Kirk, and let's just say that this went really good for Newsom in a very bad way.
So like you right now should come out and be like, you know what? The young man who's about to win the state championship in the long jump in female sports,
right.
that shouldn't happen. You as the governor should step out say no.
No, and I appreciate.
But like, would you do something like that? Would you say no men in female sports?
Well, I think it's an issue of fairness. I completely agree with you on that. So that's easy to call out, the unfairness of that.
Well, look who decided to pretend he has a backbone. California's very own brain-dead Governor Gavin Newsom. The man who spent years pushing the most radical trans laws in the country, now suddenly realizing that maybe allowing men to dominate women's sports might be unfair. What an epiphany. I mean, it only took the destruction of female athletics, a tidal wave of lawsuits, and a national uproar for him to even acknowledge reality. But don't get too excited. This isn't a real stance. It's just another Newsom special. Say whatever sounds good in the moment, pretend that you never push the policies that cause a problem, and hope people are too dumb to remember. Now let's break down the sheer hypocrisy and gaslighting at play here. First, Newsom built his entire political brand on catering to the most extreme elements of the left. This is the same guy who signed Bill SB 107. Turning California into a trans sanctuary state, allowing children from other states to receive gender-affirming care without parental consent. That's right. He stripped parents of their rights and encouraged minors to run away to California for life-altering medical procedures. But now, after pushing radical gender ideology into law, he wants to act like he's the rational one on fairness in sports. Spare us. And then there's his classic equivocation, pretending to agree with Charlie Kirk on fairness while dodging any actual commitment to fixing the issue. Notice the language. I completely agree with you on that. On what exactly, Gavin? That it's unfair? Okay. Then why did you support every law that enabled this unfairness? Why did you champion legislation that forces girls to compete against biological males under the banner of inclusivity? Newsom doesn't actually disagree with the ideology behind this. He just knows it's starting to backfire politically, and now he's trying to thread the needle between reality and his activist base. This is the classic bait and switch strategy Democrats use on every social issue. First, they push extreme policies under the guise of compassion and equity. Then, when those policies create chaos, whether it's crime, inflation, or in this case, the destruction of women's sports, they pivot, act like they are the ones taking a measured approach, and blame conservatives for politicizing the problem they created. And let's be real. If Newsom actually cared about fairness, he'd be pushing for clear protections for female athletes right now. Instead, he gives this week, oh yeah, that's unfair, while doing absolutely nothing about it. This man's still in office. He can clearly do something about this, but he won't. He's just gonna talk, because that's all Newsom does. That's why he's a scumbag. Look, at the end of the day, this isn't about fairness for Newsom. It's about positioning himself for a future White House run. He knows that normal people, even in deep blue states, are waking up to the insanity of the left's gender policies. He's trying to soften his stance just enough to seem reasonable without actually admitting that he helped create this mess. It's the classic Newsom con. Play both sides, pretend to be moderate, and hope voters forget what he's actually done. But here's the thing, people do remember, and no amount of smug, hair gel doublespeak is going to erase the fact that he was the one who lit the fire he's now pretending to put out. If Newsom wants to talk about fairness, he should start by admitting that he and his party destroyed fairness in the first place. Otherwise, he can keep playing dress up as a rational moderate. Just don't expect anyone with a functioning memory to buy it.
Why is it you were able to clean it up for Xi Jinping, but you can't clean it up?
Guys, that was the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. By the way, you guys weaponized that. I saw that on 25 things. It was the most ridiculous. You know what? I will happily
happily revert back to your
Can I have the streets
counterpoint,
as clean as
weaponized,
Xi
in
Jinping?
this case, weaponized.
Can I
in
have
this case, weaponized.
Can I get the Xi Jinping
It was
streets back?
ridiculous. Give me a break.
No, but Governor,
Give me a break.
with all due respect, I
That was-
saw a
that was
beautiful
absurd.
picture of San Francisco that
Yeah.
looked like Singapore.
By the way,
and then Xi Jinping leaves and the Walking Dead come back.
By the way, it was APEC.
I-
You had dozens and dozens of foreign leaders. And California is not San Francisco, but I am the governor of California,
But
not the mayor of California,
well,
I'm not the mayor of San
You
Francisco.
were the mayor, but I just want to understand,
No, I
why
was the
is it
mayor
that we were able
back
to clean it up?
20 years ago.
But you have to admit, it's emblematic of something that if enough important people show up, it can get clean. So why not make it clean all the time?
This is peak Newsom. Dodging, deflecting, and drowning in a word salad while trying to gaslight people into thinking their own eyes are lying to them. The man is flailing so hard he might as well be competing in a synchronized swimming competition. Now let's start with the obvious. Why was San Francisco able to be cleaned up for Xi Jinping, but not for the millions of tax-paying Americans who actually live there? That's the question, and instead of answering it, Newsom resorts to his usual tricks, mocking the premise, pretending it's a right-wing conspiracy, and then whining about weaponization. Ah, yes, because pointing out that a city suddenly looked pristine only when a communist dictator arrived is now some kind of Republican psyop. First, let's address the laughable dishonesty here. Newsom tries to downplay what happened as if the massive overnight transformation of San Francisco was just some right-wing talking point. But here's the inconvenient truth. He admitted it himself, and I quote, "I know folks are saying, oh, they're just cleaning up this place because all those fancy leaders are coming to town." That's true, because it's true. His words, his own words, his own admission. So what is this gibberish about Republicans weaponizing the issue? What's being weaponized here, Gavin? Your own policies, your own admission, the fact that San Francisco under Democrat rule has become such a dystopian disaster that the only way to make it look remotely civilized is by pretending American citizens don't exist for an entire week. Then we get this desperate little pivot. California is not San Francisco. Right. But when California Dems are pushing radical policies, expanding sanctuary city laws, and turning entire downtowns into fentanyl-ridden encampments, suddenly that distinction gets a little blurry. And let's not forget, Newsom was mayor of San Francisco. He helped create the policies that destroy the city. And now he wants to pretend he's just some innocent bystander. No, Gavin, you don't get to pass the blame. You don't get to shrug your shoulders when you're the one who lit the match. And let's talk about the real reason this happened. Newsom and California Democrats have always had the ability to clean up their cities. They just chose not to until, of course, a foreign dictator showed up. This wasn't about resources. It was about logistics. It was about priorities. When the Chinese Communist Party sends its leader, the red carpet gets rolled out. The streets get scrubbed and the homeless problem magically disappears. But when hardworking Americans ask for basic safety and sanitation, they're told it's impossible, racist, or just a necessary consequence of progressive policies. And Newsom's final excuse, give me a break. Oh, he'd love for people to just let this one go, huh? He'd love for everyone to just forget that his party deliberately lets Americans live in filth, decay, and chaos, only proving it can all be reversed when it benefits them. Sorry, Gavin, you don't get a break. You don't get to act outraged that people are calling you out for exposing the con in real time. If you can clean up San Francisco for Xi Jinping, then you could have cleaned it up for your own citizens at any time. But you didn't, because it was never about fixing the problem. It was about who mattered enough to deserve a solution. And for Democrats like Newsom, that sure as hell isn't the American people.
Any Democrats you admire out there right now?
Democrats I respect.
Were you a
Bobby
Manchin
Kennedy
type?
I respect. Tulsi Gabbard.
Why are you laughing? Why are you smiling?
Because like they're on our team now because you guys kicked out like your best people. It's like the people that were into. This is a great point though, Governor. Is that Bobby Kennedy was a heterodox opinion on a thing that a lot of people were concerned about. Get him out. He's an anti-vaxxer. Yeah. Tulsi Gabbard, who was an anti-war. Get her out. She's a Russian agent. Yeah. You guys see how you have an unhealthy purification process?
Yeah. Wow. Gavin Newsom, the high priest of ideological conformity, pretending to be baffled at why the Democrat Party keeps hemorrhaging its most interesting and independent thinkers. He asks Charlie Kirk if there are any Democrats he admires, fully expecting some softball response, but the second he hears Bobby Kennedy and Tulsi Gabbard, he's suddenly completely deflated and on the defensive. He's like, why are you laughing? Or why are you smiling? I don't know, Gavin. Maybe because it's hilarious watching the Democrat Party run its own best people out of town for daring to think for themselves. And let's be clear, Kennedy and Gabbard didn't leave the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party left them. Newsom was to frame this as if these figures betray their party, when in reality they were excommunicated for questioning the dogma. What was Kennedy's crime? crime having a heterodox opinion on vaccines? Ah, yes, because in today's Democrat Party, the mere act of asking questions, citing studies, or even suggesting that government agencies aren't always infallible makes you a dangerous heretic. Meanwhile, these are the same people who spent years preaching about bodily autonomy when it suited them. But the moment Kennedy voiced skepticism about Big Pharma's unchecked power, suddenly he was a persona non grata. Specifically because a lot of Democrats, for some reason, are in Big Pharma pockets, deep in them. I'm looking at you, Bernie Sanders and Pocahontas. And then there's Tulsi Gabbard, a veteran, an outspoken critic of endless wars, and a former rising star of the Democrat Party, until, of course, she committed the cardinal sin of independent thought. She dared to challenge the establishment, called out the military-industrial complex, and wasn't interested in playing along with the party's increasingly insane ideological purity tests. The result, she was smeared as a Russian asset by none other than Hillary Clinton, the queen of projection. Because in the modern Democrat Party, the second you stop being a mindless foot soldier, they'll label you a foreign agent. And Newsom, as always, refuses to engage with the substance of the argument. Instead, he plays the shock and deflect game. Notice how he never actually defends the Democrat Party's purge of independent thinkers. He just acts incredulous that anyone would notice. It's a classic gaslighting technique. What? Us? We didn't kick them out. They left us. No, Gavin, they didn't just leave. They were attacked, vilified, and smeared until they had no choice but to walk away. And here's a kicker. This isn't just about Kennedy and Gabbard. The Democrat Party has made it a standard practice to purge anyone who refuses to march in lockstep. Questioning lockdown policies? Gone. Raising concerns about border security? Exiled. Saying men shouldn't compete in women's sports? Congratulations, you're now a far-right extremist. It's an ideological purification process, and Newsom is acting confused because acknowledging it would expose just how authoritarian his party has become. So let's call it for what it is. The modern Democrat Party doesn't tolerate dissent. It punishes it. And when people like Kennedy and Gabbard refuse to bow down, they're cast out, smeared, and conveniently labeled as right-wing. Not because they actually changed their views, but because the left moves so far off the deep end that anything short of total compliance is considered betrayal. And that's ultimately why Charlie Kirk is laughing, because the Democrats are so committed to ideological purity that they've literally handed their best people over to the other side. And we didn't even mention some of the heavy hitters that they handed over, like Joe Rogan. How do you pass up on Joe Rogan? Only the Democrats could do something like that. And Gavin Newsom, rather than taking a moment of self-reflection in this situation, just sits there dumbfounded, pretending he doesn't understand why, when he very well does. He's a part of the establishment that did this.
We're losing. We have this, I feel it's asymmetry of Donald Trump and Elon Musk sending out tweets, or you doing social media, and then me doing a 3-minute hit at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on CNN. I mean, how the hell do we compete? We're toast.
Well, I mean, part of it, and credit to you for doing long-form podcasting, because long-form podcasting does penetrate different audiences, right? And our show does very well. But part of the problem of the Democrat Party that for the health of the country would be great to change is that Democrats cannot survive in long-form podcasting environments.
Why?
It's too unscripted. It's too masculine, honestly. And the Democrat Party's become too feminine.
What is masculine about a podcast? Honestly, because I get the whole manosphere, this bro podcast.
To go
stuff.
into the wilderness with no rules and duel it out and see who's better or who's stronger. No, seriously. I mean, like, what?
Democrats can't.
No, I mean, like.
We don't do it. You're right. We, for whatever reason, don't do it.
You can laugh, but like, who in the Democrat Party?
We're not. You're right.
Will go, I mean, maybe Bernie Sanders, but he only went for like an hour and a half.
when he was a Democrat.
Well, Bobby, who's now HHS. But like, there's something to be said that if you want to earn the respect of forgotten America, you have to show them that you can intellectually joust with no script, no hard breaks, no producers in the ears, no teleprompters.
Love it.
That's where new media is going. Now, I'll only challenge one thing you say. I am reaching new audiences. I'm not talking to my bubble. Because our content is so appealing, it goes in a decentralized way.
Gavin Newsom, the man who lives and dies by PR teams, scripted interviews, and media spin, finally admits what we all have known all along. Democrats are losing the media war, and they cannot survive in an unscripted environment. And not just losing, but toast. His words, not mine. Now let's unpack this confession, because it's one of the most unintentionally honest things Newsom has ever said. He starts by whining about an asymmetry in media, as if Donald Trump firing off tweets and Elon Musk owning Twitter is somehow an unfair advantage. Newsom, let me tell you something, buddy. Your side owns legacy media. You have CNN, MSNBC, the New York Times, the Washington Post, every major late night show, Hollywood, academia, and big tech on your payroll, and yet you're still losing? That should tell you everything. And why are Democrats losing? Because as Charlie Kirk admits, they cannot survive in an unscripted long-form environment. It's too raw, too real, and too masculine. But let's analyze that for a second. What he's really saying is that Democrats are incapable of debating outside of controlled environments. They thrive on talking points, heavily edited sound bites, and sympathetic moderators who run interference for them. Take that away, put them in a real discussion where they have to actually think on their feet, and they crumble. And Kirk later makes an even greater point. He says Democrats haven't built intellectual muscle in 30 years. That's because their entire strategy relies on censorship and control, not open debate. Democrats don't win arguments. They avoid them. They don't persuade. They deplatform. They don't engage. They label, dismiss, and cancel. Why else do you think they push for content moderation on social media, scream about misinformation whenever they're losing a debate, and refuse to engage in real discussions with conservative hosts? Because they know they can't win. And notice how, for all of his rambling, Newsom never actually disputes the claim. He fully admits Democrats don't engage in long-form discussions. And he's right. Name one high-profile Democrat who is willing to go on a podcast for 3 hours and actually debate policy. Bernie Sanders dipped his toes in for about 5 minutes before retreating back to the safety of CNN. The rest, nowhere to be found. Look, if Democrat messaging were actually strong, then why is independent media crushing legacy media in engagement? Why is Joe Rogan, a guy who just sits down and talks for hours, outperforming entire news networks? Why do conservative and alternative media personalities get more views on YouTube than CNN gets on live TV? It's because real conversations are winning. People are tired of scripted nonsense, tired of pre-approved narratives, and tired of politicians who can't speak for 5 minutes without a teleprompter. Newsom knows this, which is why he's panicking. He sees the writing on the wall. New media is exposing the intellectual weakness of his party, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. So yes, Gavin, you are toast, and no amount of spin is gonna butter you back.
Last night, trying to put my son to bed, he's like, "No, Dad, what time? What time's Charlie gonna be here? What time?" And I'm like, "Dude, you're in school tomorrow." He's 13. He's like, no. This morning, wakes up at 6 something. He's like, "I'm coming." I'm like, he literally would not leave the house.
Did you let him take off school?
No, he did. Of course not. He's not here for a good reason. But the point is the point.
You canceled school for like 2 years. One day.
The point is the point, which is you are making a damn dent.
Thanks.
Oh, that laugh. That smug, dismissive, I got away with it laugh. The same laugh Gavin Newsom gave when he got caught dining at the French Laundry while locking down restaurants for everyone else. The same laugh he gives every time someone dares to remind him of the destruction he left in his wake. And here he is, again, brushing off the devastating consequences of his school closures like it's all just some funny little moment between a father and son. Now let's break this down, because Newsom's casual deflection here is as infuriating as it is revealing. First, he tells a cute little story about how his son wanted to meet Charlie Kirk, but couldn't because, get this, he had school. As if Gavin Newsom is some strict enforcer of education who would never let his kid miss a day. The irony here is so thick, it would be served as a side dish at one of his Napa Valley dinner parties. Because as Charlie Kirk rightly points out, Newsom didn't just cancel school for a day, he shut it down for 2 years. 2 years of learning loss, 2 years of social isolation, 2 years of depression, anxiety, and regression for millions of children. And what did Gavin Newsom do while California public school students were left to rot behind Zoom screens? He sent his own kids to private school where they continue learning in person. So when he smugly laughs at Kirk's remark, what he's really laughing at is his own hypocrisy. And let's talk about what those school closures actually did. Study after study has shown that those lockdowns imposed by power-hungry politicians like Newsom set an entire generation of kids back years. Math and reading scores plummeted to historic lows. Behavioral issues skyrocketed, and it wasn't just education. Suicide rates among teens surged. The American Academy of Pediatrics literally declared a national emergency over children's mental health due to the policies Newsom championed. But sure, let's all chuckle about it, right? And this is where Newsom's actual rhetorical trick kicks in. He laughs to make the issue seem unserious. He doesn't refute the claim, he doesn't explain himself, doesn't acknowledge the damage he caused. Instead, he chuckles and moves on, because that's how unserious he is about the consequences of his own actions. It's a classic dismissive deflection, a way of signaling to the audience, this isn't worth debating. Let's just laugh it off together. But here's the thing, this shouldn't be laughed off. This should be a career-ending scandal. Any politician who locked kids out of school while sending his own children to private institutions should be forced to answer for it, not joke about it on a podcast. And Newsom knows this, which is why he refuses to engage beyond his smug little chuckle. And the final kicker, Newsom still refuses to take responsibility. He won't admit he was wrong, won't acknowledge the suffering he inflicted, and sure as hell won't apologize. Because why should he? There are no consequences for people like him. The media just lets him off the hook. The Democrat Party props him up as a future presidential contender. He's betting that people will forget, but they won't. Because every parent who watched their kids struggle, every student who lost precious years of education, every family who saw their kids' mental health deteriorate due to these policies, they remember. And no amount of forced laughter is going to cover up the fact that Gavin Newsom sold out an entire generation while making sure his own kids were just fine. So at what point do we stop letting these people laugh off their own failures? How many times will they smirk their way through blatant hypocrisy while entire communities pay the price? This isn't just about one politician dodging accountability. It's about a ruling class that knows it can rewrite history in real time, confident that the media will cover for them and the public will move on. But should we? Should we accept a system where those in power impose rules they'll never follow, where they gut the future of millions without a second thought, then sneer at anyone who dares to bring it up? If their policies were so righteous, why do they never seem to live by them? Maybe that's the real lesson here. Those who preach the loudest about sacrifice and fairness are always the first to exempt themselves. And if that doesn't make you question everything they say, maybe it's time you start. Anyway, you tell me what you think in the comments down below. Hope you have a terrific day. Peace.